Right, hello brothers, this is from Hell, it is Danny from Hell. Welcome back to another live stream. This time we're going to be starting another new series, Euro Truck Simulator 2. Now, I did want to finish Mafia 2 entirely, but like, one song fucking managed to slip in and blocked it in many countries, so I appealed the copyright claim in it. It should be resolved in a month, unless, the claimer, yeah, whatever. Basically, I'm pretty much gonna be able to keep it after a month, which however time, and then we'll continue. But for now, I have fell in love with BBC Live 5. It's a fucking great radio station, so we're gonna be listening to that shit while playing Euro Truck. So yeah, why not? I did get that new 360 controller. I think I mentioned that I need to get a new one. Well, it arrived. I didn't upload the unboxing video yet, but I need to do that. And yeah, I'm basically going to be using that to play because I don't have a wheel and pedal, and fuck that shit. So let's start a new profile. Yeah, it's a pirated version, so yeah, there's no online thingy. Let's see. Oh, I know. The independent group. Hold up a second. This is gonna be fucking amazing. Hold up. The independent group. Where is it? Is this the new one? No, that's the okay. There we go. Okay, so let's see. Founders. So they still didn't appoint a leader. Let's see. 11 party members. Well, whatever. Let's see here. This is the first that left, sort of like, let's see, initially. Yeah, you know what, let's go with this. So, I mean, no offense to anybody, honestly, please. Now let's see what picture looks the most like him here. Hold on. I need. For now, I'll keep my eyes on this one. Let's see. He's kind of bald, honestly, to be honest. That can be it, especially since he has glasses. Let's see. Yeah, so far. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. Frickin' Volvo. Now, which one's the... This is the right one. Yeah, I think I want that one. And let's see. This one? No. How do you spell Brexiteer? Okay, so for fuck. Brexiteers with deal. Oh my fucking god. This video is probably, I don't know what's gonna happen, but this is funny as fuck to me, honestly. Don't use Steam Cloud, because, you know, there's no way for me getting... Yeah, that looks good. Brexiteers with deal. Fuck yeah. Stop the music. Seriously? Oh yeah, because it's a new profile, motherfucker. You know, this does count as fucking not creative, but you know, transformative content, right? I'm commentating over this, you know? It doesn't count, really? Come on. Come on. Ah, let's start in London. Although, like, she had where did she sit? In Dover, Cambridge. Yeah, let's go to. Where's Theresa May having her like meeting in Dover? Oh, fuck it. You know what? Let's just go to with London. Fuck it. Yes. No. Been playing this game for more than 20 since like before 2016, so I know what I'm doing. Come on already! Mute the music. Oh my god. Oh, great. I know how to play the game, god damn it. Okay. So, that's the wrong button. There you go. So which one is this? FH, yeah, that's the one. Options. No, use the mouse here. No. Master over here. Enough. Radio. Radio stream. Update. BBC 5 Live.
Would be the 6th in the last 16 months, so that's as many games as they've won this season. So it's on a level par with High Court petitions. They're due in the High Court on the 20th of March. This is the latest situation, of course, so that's about once every 77 days. This is the latest situation has been brought about by Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, who are owed money. What will happen between now and then? There is talk of a sale. The latest notes from the chairman, which he does
no distance whatsoever.
Occasionally make public. He said, first and foremost, he can't disclose the identity. They're going through due diligence. He wanted to separate the fact from the fiction, but he has said the facts are there is a consortium with heads of terms which have been agreed and discussions are ongoing. And I know there's an alarm bell that all football fans need to be aware of there with that situation. As far as Bolton are concerned, I'm pretty sure we've been here previously on at least one occasion, very, very close to a sale. And the other alarm bell, of course, is you need to be careful what you wish for, I think, Adrian, as well.
But Kevin, back in the day, did you feel you got the support that you needed? The people commenting off numbers? It's just something the late Gary Speed said to me once when I worked with him, that, you know, they're 5th or 6th in the league and you'd come running out and you'd look up and there'd be empty seats around the top of the ground. You think, hey, come on. Remember Gary saying, any chance here? You know, we're doing well here, we're working here, and yet we can't fill the flipping place.
I don't tend to agree with that. I think the Reebok at the time, the Macron, whatever you want to call it, was always...
Well,
I think the Premier League height of it, we were getting 26, 27,000 and the 28,000, all seats stadium. It always felt pretty full to me. I love playing in front of the home crowd. I think we got behind us home and away. And it was the crest of a wave, really, wasn't it? I mean, qualifying for Europe twice, we got to a cup final in my first year. And, it was little Bolton, wasn't it? Who were punching way above their weight. It was obviously backed by Eddie Davis, and I think that was another problem when he decided enough was enough. When the debts were approaching £200 million, he stopped putting his money in, and I think all the cost-cutting exercises started to go on, trimming the budget, trimming the staff, and I just think it was a downward spiral from then on in, really. So for me, they were the glory years. I loved playing for the club, and it was, we created some fantastic memories there, playing in Europe, going to Atletico, Bayern Munich, all these kind of places. It was an amazing period for the club, and unfortunately at the minute it's looking a little bit grim for them.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the Eddie Davis factor as well. Sadly, no longer with us, of course. For people who aren't aware, he is Bolton's biggest ever benefactor. And again, with the ongoing discussions that we're led to believe are currently taking place, according to the chairman and owner, Ken Anderson, there is an amount of money that is still due to him and his family. And I think that has got to be agreed. There's various bonuses, apparently, which need to be sorted out before any sale can be absolutely concluded. But you're right to mention Eddie Davis. I mean, it's a very, very sad story because he only passed away last November. But you know, the work he did for Bolton needs to be recognised. And I'm just going back to the Sam Allardyce days, Kevin. Very interested because you were close to Sam. I know that. But wasn't the parting of the ways when Sam eventually left? I mean, I'm broad brushing this now, but wasn't it simply a fact that, you know, he considered that the football club then weren't prepared to match his own ambitions? I mean, the story is he went into a board meeting and said, look, I'll get us in the Champions League if you cough up a bit more cash. I'll almost guarantee it. And they all said, well, hang on a bit, I think we're doing all right as we are. Let's not commit to any further. I mean, is that briefly what happened?
I think so. I think there was I don't know if it's in his book or not, but there's certainly a comment about us getting to the cup final. I think back in 2004, wasn't it, down at the Millennium when we played Middlesbrough. I think there was a discussion about you know, Phil Garside and whatnot not wanting really to go into Europe because he knew the demands were put on the club, and it was all about the Premier League, wasn't it? Surviving in the Premier League and not letting anything affect that status. Really, I think there was concerns there, and I think that's when the alarm bells really started to ring really, that he's taken the club as far as he can, I think, Yeah,
and in terms of the financial situation Bolton find themselves in, I've got to be honest and say, I'm not entirely convinced. Clearly, it's coming to a head, and that was always going to happen. I can't help but think that maybe this goes back historically, maybe 10 or 12 years with the finances, which probably too strong a term to say that the club's been mismanaged because they've had some success over that period of time, but there's always been that slight question mark, and obviously and always as well previously Eddie Davis has been around, and quite frankly to bail Bolton out of any financial problems that they've had. Unfortunately, that's not the case at the moment. I can't help but think that this is a far deep-rooted problem, I think, than just the last 2 or 3 seasons.
So on that, Kevin, how do you think you can bring it forward? Because at the moment the morale of the club is very, very low. It's been, you know, we've said he's been running to the ground. Fans aren't happy at the moment. It's going to get worse. It's going to be a cycle if they get relegated into League One. They're one off the bottom, 3 points from safety. So what can happen now?
Yeah, I mean, the results, you know, are clearly going to be crucial. I think, you know, they could find themselves 6 points adrift after the weekend with Reading and Rotherham playing, and if they lose, it Leeds, obviously. So I think the fact that they're not adrift is giving everybody a little bit of hope on the pitch. Whether or not that will affect people buying the club, whether in the Championship or League One, I think the buyers need to be the right buyers and need to look at the bigger picture. The club needs to rebuild, I think, and they need an owner and people who are going to come into the club and run it properly. I think if you look not too far up the road at Preston North End, they've got Trevor Hemmings there, who's probably worth nearly £1 billion. Being there myself and having tried to negotiate contracts and bonuses for the players, that club's run properly. You know, there may be a small profit, there may be a small loss. But if Trevor Hemmings steps away from that club would run properly and survive. So they don't need to look too far to see how that club needs to be run. You know, Ken Anderson's been there for 3 years now, and that's enough time to trim budgets and bring everything into place. They've got a hotel there, you know, running profitably.
I don't know if I woke up later early or I'm just not with the schedule, but I don't think I'm a Barnet
run properly and brought into line, really.
Yes, it does. And just to bring everybody up to date, the salaries are due this coming Thursday. That's an estimated cost of, we understand, to be around £600,000. They've got this latest winding up petition. They're due in the High Court. And of course, if Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, you know, pursue either administration, I think they're more likely to go for liquidation. But on the subject of administration, that immediately evokes a 12-point penalty, providing, of course, the club go into administration before the 28th of March. If it's after the 28th of March, you know, the dreaded administration were to happen, then those points come off next season. But if they were to go into administration this season, given the current league placing with a 12-point penalty, well, that's instant and immediate relegation. Not saying it will come to that, just trying to, you know, put it into perspective. They are in trouble. They're in deep financial trouble. There is no question about that, and it's very difficult, I think. I don't think there's any way back for the current chairman and owner, who is exactly that, what it is. There are no directors, there's no vice chairman. All the decisions appear to be made by Ken Anderson himself.
Who do you think's running the club? You know, the rumours are...
Ken Anderson's running the club, Kevin.
Yeah, but he's away, apparently.
Well, yeah.
For most of the week. He's been on holiday for 4 or 5 weeks over Christmas. you know, there's no board of directors who's...
No, there is. Paul Aldridge is there as a club consultant, but I mean, he's Ken Anderson's right-hand man, if you know, you might say...
It's just not right, though, is it? It's not.
Oh, absolutely it's not right.
Kevin,
absolutely.
Listen, on a brighter note, I want to say to you, Kevin, that one of my oldest friends is my dentist, and he's a massive Bolton fan. If you ever need anything doing, Kevin, you just shout to me.
It's almost worth getting your teeth knocked out, Kev.
Yeah. Or he'll polish them up, or he'll fill them, he'll drill them, he'll extend them, he'll bridge them, he'll do whatever
there you go, all Bolton fans.
Do you know what? He went to a dinner with his dad at Bolton once, back in the glory days. You must have been there. And Ivan Campo was making eyes at my mate's wife. And far from being jealous, he was just overwhelmed with pride and you know, he wondered how far he could have gone before he would have actually stepped in. It was a bit, you know...
This is worse than my goose story.
Yes, it is.
Let's move it on.
Kevin, you must have golf to play, surely, as an ex-footballer today. The sun's out. You on the golf course now, Kevin?
I would like to be, but it's the last day of the school holidays, so I'm under orders to take the children.
OK, you do the right thing. Nice talking to you, Kevin. All the best.
Keep in touch, Gabbo. See you soon.
OK, let's just have a quick little happy memory for Bolton fans. We've got a bit of Jack's commentary from. Is this the end of last season?
Yeah, final day against
miraculous escape from last season.
Deep into stoppage time.
Here we go. Let's hear.
Here come Bolton Wanderers. Le Fondre into the penalty area. They've scored. Bolton lead.
Jesus, fuck that announcer was excited.
Beautiful stuff. To me, I can never enjoy those things when things have gone badly since. You know, I can't.
You can't enjoy anything new. You can't enjoy whether it's good, whether it's bad.
I'll tell you something, Charlie. I certainly enjoyed that moment with that goal from Wilbraham last season because you know, people aren't aware they were losing 2-1. They get it back to 2-2. They had to win, and other results had to go their way. They got the goal they needed. Other results went their way. The rest is history.
All right. Cheers, Jack. Lovely to have you in. Jack,
my pleasure.
From Radio Manchester. Let's get Derby'd up now. Go on, Charlie.
Come on then, Mark. Mark's like desperate. He's like, what about Derby? What about Derby? So, Mark, you were just saying before we went into Bolton about how pleased you are with the work Lampard's doing.
Yeah.
And you've been, well, you actually, it's quite interesting, started as a Man United fan. I'm going to expose you.
Well, look. I was young, I was stupid. Everyone does the same thing when they're young and stupid. You support a team that's doing well, and that's all it was. And I was a United fan till I was about 8 or 9.
And then you became a real football fan and realised you should support the team where you're from.
Yeah, exactly.
Because was it your godfather that took you?
Yeah, my godfather took me to a few games at the old baseball ground, and I sort of just fell in love with it completely. And also, I remember having a very clear thought when I was about 8, which was, I'm never going to meet Andrei Kanchelskis. So why am I supporting this guy who I have no connection with at all? I may as well go to a local club instead, a team that I can really get my teeth into and enjoy and be part of. And that's what I've done, and I've been with them ever since.
And then before we actually get into some football, Adrian, did you know that at Mark's wedding, have I got this right, you had every table named after a Derby player?
Derby player, yes.
So
well,
you
that's
are
just normal, isn't it? I think I find that unexceptional. I don't.
Yeah, I completely agree. The one-shop table was where I wanted to be, but obviously we've got a Jim Smith in our very recent history, so that was the top table, just to match mine.
Arthur Cox?
No, Cox wasn't in.
He didn't make it?
Didn't make the cut. There's only, I think, 12 tables, so we had a full team and a sub.
Yeah, and who did your bride support?
Who does she support?
Yeah.
She hates football.
Why did she go along with that for the tables, didn't she?
Because she loves
I've got to have one thing, Adrian. I've got to have one thing. She had everything else. Just let me name the tables.
She's got you, hasn't she?
So come on then, into Derby themselves. They're in 7th at the moment.
Yes.
Have they got what it takes to be in a playoff final right now? Because I almost think they're going through a little moment right now because they lost against Millwall.
Yeah, we're having our traditional February wobble, I think. We tend to do this in recent history, do very well up to Christmas and then sort of start to fall away a little bit. In terms of a one-off playoff final, if we were to play one tomorrow, I'd feel confident. I don't think anybody in that top 6 would want to play against Derby County. And we've shown this year, especially in the FA Cup, that once we go away to a big team, we've been to United and beat them in the League Cup. We went off to Chelsea.
The league's your bread and butter, though.
It is, yeah. But in terms of a one-off game, the question was, would I fancy us in a playoff final tomorrow? And yes, I would. I don't think anyone would fancy playing us. However, getting into the playoffs at all is proving very tricky at the moment. There's a very, very strong series of teams in this division this year. I know we say that every year, but this year seems to be exceptionally strong in that top 6.
I think too.
And we've got to really pull ourselves together because we've got Forest away on Monday, which is at any time of the season a tough game to play against your local rivals. But at the moment, under a bit of pressure, having lost to Millwall, having dropped points at Ipswich, I think it's a tough situation at the minute, but I do trust Lampard to bring us through. I think he, although we're not, in the playoffs and we're not in the automatics, we're also not the other end of the table, which was a very real risk when he first came in, being so inexperienced. So I think he's probably, if not ahead of schedule, then certainly on schedule for doing something. And if we keep him for longer than what seems to be a customary 18 months under our chairman, then I think we've got a good shot. If we could have him for 2 or 3 years, 4 years, imagine that at this level, a manager for 4 years.
Yeah, I blame that spying business. Hang on a bit. Who's this? Sweetie, what Pottermouth's got to say today?
Hi, Adrian Duck. Hi, Charlie Duck. It's Pottermouth. I've got a poem about Stoke's current predicament. Mid-table mediocrity. I fear no cardiac arrest. It's good for my blood pressure, although I might die of boredom and a complete lack of interest. Tra!
Adrian, I think his poetry's getting better.
Oh, it is.
Mark, what do you think of Pottermouth's poetry?
He's better for the epic poem sort of side.
More of a Milton-esque.
Yeah,
he sounds a bit depressed this week.
That playoff final, I forgot you'd suffered, like you made us suffer for that dismal 1-0. Giles Barnes, was it? Did he score?
Stephen Pearson, I think it was.
I think Giles Barnes went on the run anyway. So it's etched on my memory. But then you really suffered against QPR, didn't you? Absolutely battered them.
Yeah, I mean, and in a lot of ways that sort of sums up the Championship, that game. It's just so unpredictable, so wildly exciting if you're a neutral, and yet so emotionally crushing and genuinely traumatic if you're on the wrong end of it. That game there against QPR, where we dominated the entire game, and then Zamora in the 93rd or whatever minute it is, just honestly felt like there'd been a death in the family. It was absolutely awful.
I was watching that at the car park at the Stadium of Light in Lisbon, preparing to cover the Champions League final that day. And I was standing there watching it on a monitor with Roy Keane. And it was getting really tense at the end. And it's funny, the random things you represent, and this is random. A friend of mine who works in West Africa must have been watching the game.
He's not a dentist, is he?
No, he's not.
Right.
He's like an aid worker. He just sent me a text saying, he just said, Junior Hoylett sitting on the toilet. That's all he said. And it was at that moment I was laughing about that, and Zamora scored.
Did you show Roy Keane?
I did. He just looked at me in bewilderment, stroke disgust.
Mark, I just want to pick up on something you were saying, not interrupting your story, Adrian. You said
finished. It
wasn't
really worth it as it went, but
it was quite a good story. Yeah. I think it'd be mine. Because you threw Roy Keane in there. Mark, Frank Lampard, you said you hope he stays for more than 18 months. There is a little rumour going on around Chelsea at the moment. Obviously, he's made it really clear that that's his dream and that's his goal, which is, the reason why he's got in the experience at Derby. Is that a possibility, or...?
Look, I think we're all realistic at Derby. We love having Frank Lampard. From my point of view, I love having Frank Lampard there, but I'm not naive enough to think that this is his club now and that he wants to be here for the rest of his career and that this is the pinnacle. The dream thing for me would be that he's at Derby for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, and then he leaves us as a Premier League club and joins Chelsea. I have no problem with him doing that. And I think that actually that Chelsea currently, this transfer ban having come into effect today, might mean that this is off the table anyway for the next year, because he won't want to go in and have the no input on squad. But I think Chelsea are looking over at United and thinking we can bring back an old fan favourite who can immediately rejuvenate the side, put his arm around them, tell them how good they are as footballers. That's not to say that Solskjaer or Lampard aren't good tacticians as well, they are, but they can see what a positive effect you can have from that. And at the moment at Chelsea, I can't see them winning the cup final on Sunday, and even if they do, that team to me looks a little bit defeated. It looks like they're not happy with their manager. They've got a very stubborn guy there who's similar to Mourinho, but without the successful history that he's got. So who knows? Lampard could go there, just not yet, I hope.
Please stay.
So you've got the weekend to worry about the Forest.
Then the
Forest
big East Midlands derby.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've got you, so we may be not friends anymore after tomorrow.
I think you might owe us one after that long journey back you had with me after we beat you at your place. We got Norwich, Bristol City. Stoke, Aston Villa. Who'd have thought that would be a mid-table fixture?
Yeah.
They can battle that out.
I feel sorry for Bolton again against Leeds as well.
Yeah.
You have a good weekend, Charlie.
Thank you.
And you might
Good luck tomorrow.
Lovely
Thanks very
meeting you. Take care of yourselves. This is Charles on Saturday. It's just coming up to midday.
First for news and more Premier League football than anyone else. This is BBC 5 Live.
First for news and more live Premier League football than anyone else. This is BBC 5 Live.
Correction, this show is called Charles on Friday, not Charles on Saturday, for obvious reasons that it is actually on a Friday. It's midday now.
The top news story on 5 Live this hour, a Labour MP quits over anti-Semitism.
And in sport, Chelsea deny FIFA's findings
Another
that have led
one?
to their transfer ban.
Oh.
And don't forget all our podcasts are available.
Oh, but they didn't say they would join the
your favourite podcast app.
independent group, so...
This is BBC
5
5
Live.
Here's Richard Foster with the news.
The MP Ian Austin has resigned from the Labour Party. He's represented Dudley North since 2005 and left because he's unhappy with the state of the party, but says he has no plans to join the new independent group of MPs set up by his former colleagues.
Look, I agree with them that the Labour Party's broken, and I agree with them that things in politics have clearly got to change, but it's not what today's about, and that's not a decision I've made. I've not talked to them about that. Leaving the Labour Party has been a really difficult thing for me to decide to do. You know, one step at a time, I think.
Well, yeah, you're essentially dropping your
local people.
The
political career,
published plans about how it'll handle a no-deal Brexit. The bill covers issues such as citizens' rights, healthcare, transport, education and energy. Correspondent is Chris Page.
The remarkable thing about all this, I suppose, is that the Irish government hopes that all the work they've done, all this contingency planning, will go to waste, in a sense. They want a deal. They've said that no matter what they do in terms of no-deal preparations, they can't completely mitigate the effects, but they do want to be as well prepared as they possibly can be.
Dozens of Conservative MPs have warned Theresa May they could rebel against the government to try to prevent no deal. Leaders of a normally loyal group of Tories are urging the Prime Minister to consider offering a free vote on alternative proposals if her reworked plan faces defeat. Andrew Percy is part of the Brexit delivery.
We're absolutely prepared to wait and see what the Prime Minister brings back. The letter we've written, warning of this, is on the assumption that something comes back and there is a meaningful vote on it.
Flybe has been saved from possible collapse. Its core operations have been bought by a consortium, which includes Virgin Atlantic, for £2.8 million. The Canadian company is taking over Dairy Crest in a deal worth nearly £1 billion. Its brands include Country Life Butter and Cathedral City Cheddar Cheese. Saputo is taking it over. Dairy Crest says virtually all its 1,100 UK jobs are safe. Elephant hunting may soon be allowed again in Botswana, partly so that their meat can be used in pet food. Cabinet ministers have recommended lifting a 4-year ban. It's estimated there are 130,000 elephants in Botswana. Some say that's too many for the ecosystem there. And thousands of people have cheered a flypast honouring 10 American airmen who died after their plane crashed in a Sheffield park 75 years ago. Tony Folds was 8 and watched as the aircraft diverted over his head, then crashed into a hill just a few metres away. He's been tending a memorial there ever since.
He tried to go over the trees, and the next thing we knew, boom. And I thought, you know, good gracious, I could have not been here if them lads hadn't gave their lives. It's a tribute that these deserve. They deserve it.
That's the news. Rob Schofield has the sport.
Well, Chelsea say they categorically refute FIFA's findings, which have led to them being put under a transfer ban for 2 windows. They will appeal against that and the £460,000 fine for breaching rules around signing youth players from overseas. The FA will also appeal. They've been sanctioned £390,000. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer says Jesse Lingard and Anthony Martial want to play against Liverpool in the Premier League on Sunday. Both have been nursing injuries this week. Jack Butland will wear a completely plain classic goalkeeping kit tomorrow for Stokes' Championship game against Aston Villa. No badge, no sponsor, no name, just the number 1. It's in tribute to Coventry City have 11 days to inform the EFL about where they'll play their home games next season. If they don't, they might risk being thrown out of the Football League altogether. And England's women collapsed to defeat in the first one-day international against India, chasing 203 to win in Mumbai. They lost 7 wickets for 25 runs, eventually falling 66 short.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live on digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
Hello there. For most of England and Wales, it's another very mild day. Plenty of sunshine on offer, albeit hazy at times. However, we have seen some dense patches of fog. While most are shifting, some eastern and southern spots of England may hold on to low cloud for much of the day. That will peg back the temperatures and it will feel quite disappointing. For Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, we're seeing more cloud, outbreaks of patchy rain, and it's quite blustery here. After a bright start, North and East Scotland will see the cloud increase through the day, but it's still very mild. Temperatures widely 13 to 16 Celsius, but North East England, North Wales and North Devon can see highs of 17 or even 18 Celsius.
Good old
5 Live weather.
More live Premier League football than anyone else.
Later on tonight, on the station with more live Premier League football than anyone else.
And it's a London derby.
West Ham against Fulham. Pellegrini versus Ranieri.
Kickoffs at 7:45. The best live sport.
This is your football station.
This is 5 Live.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live. Available on the BBC Sounds app. Giles on Friday with Adrian Giles.
It's just gone 6 minutes past 12. The Sports Minister wants to ban the sale of scratch cards and National Lottery tickets for under 18s. At the moment, it's 16, the lower age limit. Mims Davis says she wants to protect the most vulnerable, though any changes wouldn't kick in until 2023. When the current National Lottery licence is up for renewal. Mark Etches is CEO of Gambling Aware. Mark, what's your take on this?
Adrian, good morning. It's Gamble Aware, actually.
Gamble Aware,
we've been supporting the need for a review of this for some time.
It's 12 a.m.
The National Lottery is rather unique when it comes to gambling products. You know, gambling in Britain is an adult activity, and clearly at 16 and 17, you are a child, and so we don't think that it's right.
What evidence is there it's causing a problem as we are at the moment with it being anyone over the age of 16 can buy them?
Well, I think we have to recognise that gambling is a public health issue in this country. There are 2 million adults suffering some form of harm, and 340,000 of those are problem gamblers. And indeed, it's also reported that 55,000 11 to 16-year-olds are problem gamblers. So I think when it comes to children, we should take the precautionary principle, and certainly for all other gambling products, then you are not able to gamble until you are 18, until you are an adult. So I think it's quite right that the government should look very carefully at whether 16 and 17-year-olds should buy lottery products. And of course, remembering this isn't just about a national lottery draw, this is about scratch cards, which increasingly can be accessed online as instant win, and so the National Lottery really sits in a rather peculiar and unique position, and I think it's right the government should look at it.
What evidence is there that many 16 and 17-year-olds are buying scratch cards anyway? We got one retailer saying this one, and they can't see it's a problem. There's not many coming in at that age, apparently.
Well, the Gambling Commission published a report last part of last year that cited 450,000 11 to 16-year-olds had spent their own money on gambling products in the previous week.
But was scratch cards part of that? Do we know that?
And one of the highest levels of participation was indeed scratch cards. So there is clear evidence that children are indeed buying them, and we know at 16 and 17 that it's legally available to them. What we also
and I would say that those teenagers that gamble are the alcoholic type of teenagers that grow up and they're basically sort of bullies. They're the type who go out and drink and shit. So
they present a national lottery ticket, and that can spark something in them that takes them down the path towards problem gambling. So I think from a public health point of view, a preventative point of view, it's very important that we look carefully at what we permit our children to do with an adult activity.
What about sports sponsorship? I mean, it's the absolute normalisation of gambling brands, albeit many of them from the Far East, which we probably wouldn't have much contact in anyway. It's written in Chinese script, so you don't even know what it says on there. But it seems to be on half of all football shirts.
Well, indeed, 9 of 20 Premier League clubs are sponsored by gambling firms.
Premier League?
Gamble Aware is concerned on behalf of children about what we might refer to as the gamblification of professional sport and football in particular. And in fact, this weekend, GambleAware is launching a national public health campaign around the Sunday game of Manchester United against Liverpool about bet regret. That's not directed at children particularly, but it's directed at young men and trying to encourage them to moderate their gambling and be aware of not making that impulsive bet in circumstances such as when they're drunk or chasing a loss. And I think a byproduct of that, I hope, will be a conversation, particularly between parents and children, about the nature of gambling and the risks associated to it. But I think sport and football in particular really does need to address the fact that it has this relationship that spills over into family life, and we must take a precautionary approach, I think, to the impact, a possible impact they may be having on children in the future.
It does bring a lot of money into the game and into clubs. I mean, there would be real concerns in terms of higher ticket prices and so on if the betting sponsorship did dry up or was regulated out of it.
Well, I think that's I think that's something football's got to think very carefully about. Of course, other sports have had to pay attention to other public health issues around alcohol, for example. And this is the point, really. Gambling is a public health issue. As I say, 2 million adults are suffering some level of harm in Britain, and we know a considerable number of children are already. So I think it's right that football and sporting authorities think carefully about that relationship. I think it's about taking it in the round. There's a lot of attention on television advertising, but actually recent research shows that 5 times as much money is being spent by gambling companies on online marketing. But of course that does impact on sport too. And very concerning, I think, is the statistic that shows that 12%, 1 in 8, 11 to 16-year-olds are following gambling businesses on social media, and quite often that will be around them looking up their favourite football team and the score and so on.
What education is done in schools on this? Is there anything in the curriculum at all?
Well, we've recently made a submission. GambleAware has made a submission to the government, who are looking at the moment at the sorts of themes that ought to be included in the PHSE
some kids just, they don't give a shit, right? They do what the fuck they want to do. Because, they're rebellious teens, but seriously,
a range of risky activities like gambling more broadly, so that we try to give young people the resilience
like the parents grant them and that's it, fuck off, or like nothing.
Gambling specifically,
honestly, mate,
but we do think it's important that at primary and secondary levels, that this sort of activity ought to be included in that sort of curriculum.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Mark Etches of GambleAware. It's just gone 12 minutes past 12. Senior lawyers want judges to learn how to interpret emojis, including understanding some of the sexual and sometimes sinister messages.
Oh, come on!
I mean, if I tell you what the aubergine emoji represents and you think it's only a vegetable, you'd be wrong. You sort of leave it at that.
I know.
See what you think. Felicity Jerry is an international barrister who specialises in complex crimes.
Oh my God!
Hello, very well, thank you.
Good. Is this something you've come across in your work?
Yes, we come across all forms of communication, face-to-face, documents, but data communication increasingly forms part of particularly the complex cases that I do. So, for example, a terrorism trial where those accused are communicating with each other, or a multi-handed murder, as we would call it, where you've got several defendants accused of conspiring to kill someone. Those types of cases, obviously multiple sexual abuse cases where there's communications between offenders and victims. Those types of cases commonly involve communication, and obviously nearly always now involve digital communication. So we can't assume we know what that means. You've just given a good example. It's always a question in court of trying to interpret communication. Now, if it's a murder, the victim is dead. You can't ask them what they meant by their communication. If it's a terrorism trial, there may be different meanings to communication. So in a terrorism trial I did last year, we needed a glossary in relation to Islamic terminology. We can't assume we know what a piece of communication means. And in the data context, there's an added problem that the technological way things are done can add additional meaning. A simple example might be you do, and I said it as a bit of a joke today, but you might use an emoji of a beetle. Now that could be an insect, it could be a musician, it could be a car. It's a question of interpretation, and sometimes the context is obvious, and sometimes it's not. And the danger in court, unless we have some sort of legal scientific primer, is that assumptions will be made and a miscarriage of justice will occur.
But isn't that just what the defence barrister does? You know, you look, or indeed the prosecution, you look at the evidence and you inform the debate in the court and say, well, this means this. So doesn't it just not come out in the normal run of things?
It can do, yes, of course. And you can have a witness who will say what they meant, but they might not be believed, and the other side say, well, what you actually meant was this, and you can leave it up to the jury. So in some cases, it's very simple and straightforward. But if you think of complicated issues, let's say the Silk Road, that was a huge issue, or international fraud, where very complex instructions might be given or threats may be made using data communication, and that might not just be emojis. There are all sorts of ways of communicating, not just social media, that is beyond the knowledge of the people in the room. And in those circumstances you might need an expert. If there's something cultural or linguistic, a threat in one culture in a picture form may mean nothing to somebody in another culture. You might need an expert to assist with that. And the reason I suggested a primer is because the UK Supreme Court already has a scientific primer system. They launched a couple last year on DNA and fingerprints, and frankly, if judges don't understand DNA and fingerprints, we're in a bit of trouble. So my view is maybe these primers could start dealing with the stuff that's new and that we're having to deal with on a daily basis, given the amount of communication data that can be in a complex criminal trial. So some simple tools to assist courts so that we don't make mistakes is probably a very good idea.
Is there any particular sort of emojis that you're unfamiliar with? If not that I would send you a picture of an aubergine, because I don't know you. But would you know what it might mean?
Precisely. You could so easily make a mistake and it be totally misinterpreted, particularly in cases involving sexual offending. You might have sexual communications between people that have a different meaning to, as I say, everybody in the room. There's an example in the United States that I found today of a communications between people who wanted to rent an apartment and the prospective landlord, and the court in the US said, well, the answer in emojis of a champagne bottle and a sort of hurrah was enough to say that they had committed to renting that apartment. So the landlord sued them when they went off and rented another one. So there was an interpretation there of those emojis that actually led in a civil case to payment of compensation. So it's already happening in courts on a daily basis that people will dispute what was meant. But in more complicated cases,
that's so dumb,
of the type that I'm talking about, where you may have an international fraud that is dealt with, let's say, from a boiler room in Thailand and targeting people in Norway, and I've certainly done one of those, the level of communication will include cultural and linguistic differences that you might need expert help with. In some cases you won't, in some cases you will, but if we recognise that that's a potential problem that could lead to a miscarriage of justice, then that's something we really ought to be dealing with. I suppose that the final example I can give you is the old story of Derek Bentley. You know, we all know the story of Derek Bentley. He said, let him have it, and everybody said it meant different things. If you have that in an emoji, you've still got somebody the subject of miscarriage of justice, although we don't hang people anymore.
This is where juries come in. Can't juries help some old duffer of a judge out on these things?
Well, you might have some old duffer on a jury, of course, and the judge may be very technologically savvy. It can happen both ways. The whole point is that you can't assume that you know what something means. Often the context is obvious, but that's why I gave you the Beatles example, really, because it's a very famous story, isn't it, of a judge saying, who are the Beatles? And everybody says, oh, that judge didn't know who the Beatles were. It's probably not true, he probably did, but what the point of the question is, you can't assume we all know who the Beatles are. You need to explain to the jury who they are, in case you've got somebody on a jury who doesn't know. You know, who, I suppose it would be Jay-Z now, or some...
I mean, within reason, trials go on long enough anyway. You've got to explain who the Beatles are, for heaven's sake, or even Jay-Z. How long have you got?
Yeah.
You're just trying to string things out because you're a lawyer, because you're paid by the hour, if you're honest, aren't you?
Oh, no, don't have that conversation.
Okay.
That's really unfair, isn't it?
Okay.
I'm trying to talk to you about technology. Don't be silly.
All right, how do you pronounce your surname, by the way? I know you're QC. I missed out the QC.
You did, and lots of people miss out QC for women. So
All right.
Very important
Well, I didn't.
so there's not many
For me,
others.
it wasn't sexist. It was just pure incompetence on my part.
We'll put it down to a mistake.
Okay. All right. All the best, Felicity. Thank you very much.
Nice to talk to you. Thank
That
you.
is Felicity Gerry, QC. It's just gone 12. How about a bit of music?
Ah, no. Stop. This video is gonna get copy striked already, right?
It's a powerhouse of the music industry, but by 2012 it was in dire trouble. The group was broken up, with EMI being sold on to Universal, the label itself going to Universal. So what went wrong? Sounds like a good book here, and Eamon Ford has written a good book, a music journalist. It's called The Final Days of EMI, Selling the Pig. Where do we start? Where was the, where was the beginning of the end here, Eamon?
Oh, goodness. See, there's lots and lots of reasons. To kind of put it in context, the company was bought in 2007 for £4.2 billion by a private equity firm called Terra Firma. But in that kind of wider context, the recorded music industry was kind of in free fall. The revenues have been declining solidly since 2000 because of the kind of disruptive influence of digital. And it's halfway through that decline. And EMI was, at that stage, one of only 4 global major record companies, but it was the weakest. So it was the entire industry was kind of going through a pain barrier at this point, and EMI was the weakest, and it ended up kind of being the most visible casualty of the whole process of just kind of this absolute upheaval that digital caused for the music industry, and then obviously went on to affect lots of other industries like newspapers, TV. Everyone else has kind of been affected by digital, but music was kind of the first one through the ringer.
So was it, to what extent was it avoidable, or was it just a structural thing changing in the industry full stop?
There are various different arguments about what could have happened to ensure that EMI survived. And one argument was that if the regulators had allowed them to merge with Warner Music, and they'd tried that several times in the kind of 6-7 years before that, that may have saved EMI. Also, at the time when Terra Firma bought EMI, off the 4.2 billion they spent, they borrowed 2.6 billion from Citigroup. But that deal just went through at the precise moment that the entire global economy went into collapse, and Citigroup's approach generally was to sell off a lot of that debt on the debt markets, but because of the economic crash, the debt markets evaporated overnight. So then suddenly this massive bank is kind of has 2.6 billion hanging in the balance here, and they were putting enormous pressure on Terra Firma to kind of keep meeting its debt covenants. So it's almost a story of just the absolute worst time, and it was the worst time to buy a company, and B, a music company. 2007, you couldn't have scripted it better. It was like, it was the worst time to buy a company like EMI.
So To what extent was this somebody in the shape of, I think his name was Guy Hands, wasn't it? Was he part of Terra Firma?
Guy Hands is the head of Terra Firma, yeah.
Right, okay. So to what extent was it a case of applying people often try and do it with football, where you can try and apply, and maybe you should try and apply rational business principles to an industry that is sort of illogical, has kind of inherently got too much emotion in it. Did it just not compute?
It's a very, very difficult balance that you have to tread here, because the music industry, or the music business, there's two parts to that title. There's the music, the art side, and there's the commerce side. And the best people who have worked in the music industry can speak to the accountants and the lawyers, and then kind of walk across the room and go and meet an artist, someone like Kate Bush or Damon Albarn from Blur, and be able to speak to them in their language. And the problem was that obviously EMI had a lot of financial problems. It had a very, very good relationship with its artists. It was very much seen as the artist-friendly label. It had had that reputation. But then people from the outside were coming in. They were going, "This is an industry that's entirely predicated on failure." A very famous figure that's kicked around is that 90% of the acts who were signed to major record companies at that time failed to turn a profit, but the 10% who did generated an enormous profit. So you had Terra Firma had come in from turning around Elan businesses, famously a German service station called Tank and Rast. They were also turning around the Odeon, and these were businesses that had kind of one or two problems with the German service station. It was very simple, kind of fix the toilets. The toilets were notoriously filthy, so they fixed those, and people started to use them and pay for them. The Odeon, it was about improving the seating and things like that. But when you bring in creative people and you're dealing with them on a financial level, there isn't one simple solution. What kind of private equity companies would refer to as a turnkey solution? There's not one thing that you can identify. There was so much happening within EMI itself, and then there was so much happening in the broader music industry. So they were arguably very, very out of their depth, and perhaps they were not very good at speaking the language of artists, and because artists are a very complex mixture of ego, of arrogance, of neediness, and all of these things, and they have to be kind of treated very carefully. Perhaps there is an argument that at points EMI had overindulged its artists or spoiled its artists, but you can't just come in and kind of treat them as a straight commodity. These are people, these are creative people, and it's being able to speak their language, but also being able to speak a business language.
Well, also, it's got to start with heart. It's got to start with hearing a bit of music that just lifts you off your feet. Well, not about how many units of this can I shift. I mean, one's related to the other, but
of course. But you'll have people, specialists in the record companies called A&Rs, which stands for Artists and Repertoire, and they're the people who sign the artists, and then everyone else is the machine around that. So when Terra Firma came in, they weren't changing the A&Rs. They were changing things at the board level, at the kind of apex of the corporate level. So A&Rs were still able to kind of try and sign artists and work with their existing artists. I don't think they were trying to kind of change the types of artists they were signing, but they were also trying to understand how you could make a profit around an artist in a very, very difficult market that was transitioning. CD sales were going through the floor. Digital was kind of only partly helping. Services like Spotify were still in their infancy, and it took until 2014 for the global record industry to start to go back into recovery. So yeah, these were basically the darkest days for the record industry. So they had a hell of a challenge on their hands to try and fix the weakest company in a very, very volatile market.
They sold all the records, all the vinyl first time. Anyway. I bought hundreds of EMI and everyone else. Yeah. Then CDs came in. They got an absolute freebie there, complete windfall. Then you bought it all over again on CD.
Yeah.
And then they still managed to mess it all up.
Well, you see, the problem is that you made those profits in the past. That doesn't guarantee you that you'll still exist in the future, because these things there's a lot of money that is invested in trying to develop and break artists. There's a figure that's commonly quoted that to basically get an act out, a first track out by an artist on a major label, you're kind of talking £1 million, £1.5 million upfront investment. These things are not cheap. You have to give them an advance. You have to pay for studio time, you have to pay for all the marketing and promotion around them. So it's not, you just suddenly can't find an artist and they become the biggest artist overnight, and you've spent £5 on them. You have to spend a lot of money, and a lot of that time you're never sure if that's ever going to that money's ever going to come back to you. It's an incredibly risky business.
Tell us about the Coldplay toothbrushes.
Oh, this is a long story. Well, it's not a long story. It was Guy Hands had various different ideas for marketing that they wanted to kind of present to the artist, to kind of say, here are things that you could do. There was various suggestions that they were going to do a retail exclusive with Next. That they were going to get Gorillaz to be the kind of the face of Lynx Africa, body spray. And one of the ideas that Guy Hands took to the company was that he was going to get electric toothbrushes that would play Yellow by Coldplay. So some people see this as maybe a visionary idea, some people see it as a ridiculous idea. I will let your listeners decide for themselves.
Thanks very much for talking to us. That's,
Thank you.
Eamon Ford. The book's called The Final Days of EMI, Selling the Pig. Earlier on, we were talking about... Ellie, did you know that... Were you aware that an aubergine emoji represents a part of the male anatomy? Did you know that?
Well, it's not something I kind of use on a regular basis.
But did you know?
Yeah, I kind of understand that vegetables can be substituted for things that are not necessarily
this has given
related.
rise to the usual degree of smut by text from some of our listeners. Somebody called Sarah's been in touch saying, why not a carrot? Instead, or a courgette? Is it just arrogance to put an aubergine? Well, think, I don't know how to put this. Well, mine doesn't represent a carrot, but then it doesn't look like an aubergine either. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
well,
really
you see, the aubergine, or whatever you call it, right, the eggplant is,
have you got something better to talk about?
It's very thick and long. That's why you don't use a carrot or a banana, because, you know, it's thicker, you know, bigger and better.
If you're not world champion, you don't get in. So we've got World Cup winner and also England's most capped ever rugby union player, male or female, Rocky Clark, is on Sports Panel today. We've also got Josh Warrington, IBF featherweight champion from Leeds, and also Sean Murphy, 2005 Super Bowl champion. And we're going to talk about a massive, you know, when there is a huge atmosphere at an event, because obviously Wales against England in Cardiff on Saturday is going to be really a real cauldron of noise. So what's it like to have that kind of crowd behind you? Exactly, the energy that it gives you. How difficult is it to play if you're on the other side as well?
I've always talked to Graham Lasso once, and he'd be getting dogs abuse. I remember he said he thought, you know, when it was an away game, when I was getting vitriolic abuse, I knew I was having a good game.
Yes.
And he said, how twisted is that? You know, it's a good day when you're being abused, if you stop and think about it. But he said it was an energy. It's an energy, so you've just got to use it. You know, you always have these champions on the Sports Panel. I think one week, no, seriously, I'd like to hear a journeyman's edition. Yes. You know, they fascinate these people that play, you know, brilliant players, but have been on the Challenger Tour. So, you know, they're playing a tournament in the Crimea, then going by Boss to Santander or something to play in another one.
That's quite a good idea, actually, but I'm not quite sure how you sell it to the guests. So we're doing a losers edition of the Friday Sports Panel today.
It's not losers.
I've got all these cars coming out of fucking nowhere. What the fuck, mate?
There's something, you may have something there.
Honestly.
You've planted a seed. We'll talk about boxing politics as well. We'll talk about break dancing at the Olympics.
This story from yesterday.
Whether it's the right idea, whether it's the wrong idea, whether it's really going to attract a younger audience.
Yellow Olympics.
Sean was part of the delegation that went to Paris with the World Snooker and Billiards Association to actually lobby for snooker in the Olympics, so he will have some things to say about that. And also, I don't know if you saw the story about the basketball player, the American basketball player, whose shoe basically fell apart within 30 seconds of him starting a match, and he ended up injuring his knee.
No.
Who was his sponsor?
Well, I'm not going to mention the name of the sponsor, but yeah, it's a big brand, but the shoe just basically deteriorated.
Oh, was it?
Rob, are you going to name the...
I've just gave Adrian the little hand.
Oh, okay, fine, yeah.
But it can't be a secret.
I want to see that clip.
Yeah, it's Nike. It was a Nike shoe. It was a Nike. Yeah, it was a Nike shoe.
Right. Well, I didn't say that. If you're one of Nike's lawyers, then that's Ellie and Rob.
No, absolutely. No. I don't think there's any argument about it. There's plenty of pictures of the shoe falling apart, so I think that's fine.
You're sounding very defensive.
So this is our Ask the Audience question. When has your sporting equipment, and we're not going back to aubergines again, let you down on 85058?
but I think if it was like an aubergine, you should see a doctor, shouldn't you? It's starting to worry me all that. Anyway,
It's a cauliflower, you should see a doctor.
Well, the only real sport equipment they got is like
12:30. High time for the news and sport.
On digital, BBC
dumbbells and like 2
Sounds,
kilograms each. I don't know if it's like
This
the
is
entire
BBC Radio 5 Live.
With the headlines, I'm Richard Foster. The MP for Dudley North, Ian Austin, has announced he's resigning from the Labour Party.
It's not that they let me down, I just don't use them.
But he says he has no plans to join the independent group. The Irish Deputy Prime Minister says he hopes major new laws to manage a no-deal Brexit will never be used. Simon Coveney's announced the bill. It aims to protect jobs, essential services and citizens' rights. The family of Shamima Begum say they're working on ways to bring her newborn son back to the UK from Syria. In a letter to the Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, they've also threatened legal action to try to overturn his decision to remove her British citizenship. And Botswana could lift a ban on elephant hunting. It's partly so the animal's meat can be used in pet food, and partly because of worries that the 130,000 elephants in the country is too many for the ecosystem there. That's the news. Rob Schofield has the sport.
Well, to news of Chelsea's transfer ban until the summer of 2020. The club have denied FIFA's findings that have found them in breach of rules around signing minors. This isn't unprecedented, and appeals have been successful in the past, as our sports news correspondent David Ornstein explains.
The case of Barcelona, they had their ban pushed back, and that allowed them to sign a number of players who went on to be key in their push for success. And many will feel that Chelsea will follow that precedent if indeed they appeal. Well, they've stated their intention to. Real Madrid actually had their ban halved.
Well, Chelsea have been fined £460,000, while the FA, who will also appeal, have been sanctioned £390,000. Maurizio Sarri's men will play Dynamo Kiev in the last 16 of the Europa League, by the way. That draw has just taken place. Arsenal will play French side Rennes. Now, Jurgen Klopp has backed Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to become the Manchester United manager permanently ahead of their two sides' Premier League clash on Sunday. The interim boss has chalked up 11 wins, 1 draw and a defeat since he came in, which was after the last fixture between the two.
He has the quality and he had the luck in the right moment, and now he's in charge, and there's no doubt about that. That he will be the manager next year as well. That's clear. Can you imagine one situation when they say we bring in another manager, and the new manager will lose one game? That's of course not possible. So he deserves.
Yeah, I'm gonna research that online.
Loveless Jack Butland will wear a vintage plain goalkeeping kit tomorrow for Stoke's championship game against Aston Villa. It's in tribute to Gordon Banks. It'll have no badge, no sponsor, no name, just a plain number 1 on the back. England's women lost 7 wickets for 25 runs in defeat to India in the first one-day international in Mumbai. Chasing 203, Heather Knight's side were bowled out for 136 in the 41st over to lose by 66 runs.
We don't have many partnerships with the bat. Obviously, me and Nat built a good partnership, 70-odd.
What's up with these vehicles and
Nat was unlucky to get out when she did. We felt like we were in really good position. We were knocking it around nicely, and it became easy to do that. And unfortunately, that was the only partnership we had. We weren't able to put some more partnerships together.
Wales fullback Lee Halfpenny will make his return from concussion when Scarlets host Cheetahs in the Pro 14 on Sunday. That's a day after England play Wales in the Six Nations in Cardiff. He could be recalled later in the tournament, though. Elsewhere, there are reports that Manu Tuolangi is set to quit Leicester Tigers for French club Racing 92. That would end his international career, as England don't pick outside the Premiership. We spoke to Matt Dawson earlier about it.
It would be a loss because he's a very, very good player and makes a difference, but he's got a future to think of. He's going to have a family to think of at one stage. That is a huge amount of money, and the best players in the world, if they're generating that sort of interest and they have an opportunity to earn those types of salaries, then I'm going to pat him on the back and say, good luck to you. I didn't play in France. I wish I had.
And in Rugby League, Championship side Widnes Vikings have gone into administration. They face liquidation if suitable investment isn't found by next week. That's your latest from BBC Sport.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live. On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
On the roads, M1 northbound in South Yorkshire, queuing traffic because of the earlier incident from junction 33 at Catcliffe to junction 34 at Meadowhall. All lanes have been reopened. M5 northbound in Worcestershire, 1 lane's closed, long delays because of a multi-vehicle accident. Between junction 7 at Worcester and junction 6, travel time there half an hour. Northamptonshire and the northbound M1, 1 lane's blocked, very slow traffic because of an accident. That's at junction 15, the Northampton turn. And in Essex on the A12 northbound, the road is closed and the stationary traffic from junction 18 at Danbury to junction 19 at Boreham interchange. Queues as far back as 3 Mile Hill, that's because of an accident there. Richard Foster, 5 Live Travel.
on BBC One. How do you move like that? Wow.
Our quest to
So
find
much
the greatest
sass.
Is almost over.
There's so much sass.
That was amazing.
I love it. I can't get enough of it. Oh, everything has been leading to this.
Who will win £50,000?
And the chance to dance on Strictly. It's the final of The Greatest Dancer.
Do not miss it.
Saturday night at 7:10 on BBC One.
First for news and
And
the
more
best live
Premier
sport.
League.
This is BBC 5 Live. Giles on Friday.
With Adrian Chiles.
It's time for our iPlayer look, recommending something from one of the free-to-air streaming services.
No, 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 no. Really, BBC?
Chris, to talk over those vocals there, that
No!
is Cliff with the classic track.
Stop! Stop.
Across, which features very much in the programme we're looking at this week. It's BBC 4's The First Black Brummies. In it, the poet Sue Brown looks at what life was like in the post-war years for Birmingham's Caribbean community. Sue, thanks for coming on. Love the programme. As you probably know, I've got a sort of special interest in this kind of department. So just tell us, where are you from then? What part of the town?
What part of the town? So my parents settled in Sparkbrook, Sparkbrook side of the city.
I'm in the wrong side of
they
the
moved to
lane.
Kings Heath.
Actually, no, I'm not.
Okay, so you're in the south sort of Birmingham area. But my dad was from Handsworth originally, and that was a similar kind of, you know, you saw those changes in the 50s and 60s as that came along. We've also got Milton Godfrey, who appears in the programme, a writer and musician, came to Birmingham from Jamaica. When was that, Milton?
In 1960.
Okay, and what brought you over? That was your family? What was it specifically? What was the...
No, my family came here in the 50s, but I came over as a student in 1960. But a couple of years after I came over, I joined the forces, and I ended up in Cyprus, an active service in the United Nations, and from there I went to Berlin, Spandau prison, where I was guarding Rudolf Hess, Spanish Sheriff, and Albert Speer.
When the Yankees go marching.
But then, while I was there in Berlin, I had a band. I was playing music as well. And when I left the forces in 1968, I went to live in Ireland, and I had a show band over there as well, in a place called Ballinamallard, which is part of Inniskillen, playing in Belfast and Lisnaskey and Ballybuffet and Buncrana Boys School and places like that. But I was still writing at the same time. I was writing poetry and short stories and plays. And when I came back to England, I started writing plays quite a lot and performing quite a lot. And some of my plays include The Magic Man and Nights in Darkness, which was at Rep Studio Theatre, and Reflections of a Journey, Central Television, and so on, and so on.
So, the experience of arriving for the first time in the city is actually brilliantly told in some of the amazing archive films that you've unearthed here. Now, I've been lucky enough to come across them in the past. I mean, just talk to us a little bit about them. There's one called, is There a Colour Bar in Britain, which was a really groundbreaking documentary. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, those documentaries, it was the BBC, Ed, the producer, Paulo, they came across those archives. And was there a colour bar in the UK? And of course there was. How it was presented, for some people they would say no, and for other people, yes. It was quite evident that there was, So for many people coming from what was termed as the West Indies back then, it was a surprise. Like for my parents, my dad, people that thought that they too were British, and they come to England and they see, they can't even get a room, So
I made a documentary for the BBC in the West Midlands looking at that film and another one called Colony, which Colony, which I know you're familiar with. And there's another one whose name escapes me about
Philip Dolinan.
Yes, that one. And it hadn't really occurred to me to what extent we had two lots of ignorances meeting each other. There was the extent to which I didn't realise in my ignorance that in Jamaica and other communities in the Caribbean, the mother country had been sold as a land of milk and honey. They had been told it was paradise back in the mother country. It was totally kind of misled. How did that come about?
Well, I think that after the war, when Britain wanted people to come and help rebuild the country, and in 1948, a lot of returning servicemen to the Caribbean read the newspaper in Jamaica, the Gleaner, the Daily Gleaner, that Britain wanted people to come and actually be part of the workforce in England. So, but prior to that, of course, you know, you had soldiers in the First World War and the Second World War, and some of them that went back to Jamaica in 1948, they went on leave, and when they saw in the paper that Britain wanted people, they all got into the Empire Windrush.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it.
And so, you know, they had this idea that, you know, Britain was a land of milk and honey. But when they arrived, they soon discovered that that wasn't the case at all. I mean, even my experience as well kind of led me to that sort of situation, because I experienced prejudice at school, you know, at college I experienced prejudice in the workplace and factories. I experienced prejudice in the army, and I was really disappointed because I didn't expect it to be like this. I expect, you know, to be walking in a country where I was equal.
And welcome.
So you mentioned this film Colony, which is still on iPlayer. And actually, if you don't mind, there's just a little bit that isn't actually in your film, but I happened to do a thing about Colony about last year. And I know you'll be familiar with this bit. It's one of the finest uses of language I can think of any programme I've seen in my life, really. There's one line which makes it worth watching this film Colony, if for nothing else. And it's this beautiful young woman talking about arriving by train into Birmingham, and she was told it'd be the land of milk and honey, but it wasn't.
I thought, I was going to travel, and England would be a beautiful place. But when we got on the train and we saw some of the smoky buildings, you know, as if they were frowning, and the sun wasn't very bright. It was sort of hazy. I thought I wouldn't be able to stay in England. And I wanted to cry, but I was ashamed to do so.
Now, I never met you, Sue, but I know as a poet you will be standing and applauding above your head anyone can describe a building as frowning.
Frowning.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
But that was the impression it gave, you know. You imagine you're coming from a hot, sunny climate, and even if, you know, things weren't financially great for you, you know, the weather at least made things a little bit more palatable. Coming here... with all the greyness and the dirt, and of course after the war the buildings are all you know, not in a good state, and then if people are not welcoming you and you're hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away from home, you know, that, you know, I know for my dad in particular it was very, very hard, you know.
We've got you've got a bus conductor.
It says when you go over 24 hours, right?
He told you about everyday racism he experienced in his job.
You have some of the white people, you know, they wouldn't touch your hand. I don't know if they think that they're going to have something come out on them. And they would drop the money in your hand.
Yeah, you need to get a shift
as a conductor.
Get out of the UK. Okay.
They wouldn't touch you.
How did you feel?
We were degrading.
So it reminds me, Sue, of my Auntie Marge. That was an old Brummie, lived on the Coventry Road. Came to us at Christmas. I will always remember this. She was talking about Rusty Lee.
Oh, yes.
You know, the chef.
I know Rusty Lee.
And she was going, oh, I love that Rusty Lee. I just love her. I think she's so funny. He said, but I don't like seeing her black hands in all the food. I thought, well, what do you do with that? She's trying to talk about a love for this woman, but doesn't like to see her sort of handling pastry with her bare black hands. Where do you go with that, Sue? Can you write a poem about it or something? Find something that rhymes with Marge. God rest her soul.
I know, but many people, people will say, well, this statement, I'm not racist, I have black friends, So you hear all those things all the time. People don't know how to address the situation. I don't know, pre the war, I don't know what people's thoughts in the education were about black people or people of the Caribbean, yet people of the Caribbean were told everything about Britain. The education, the politics, all these kind of things. So people felt as though they were British till they came here.
There's an amazing clip in the film, and I think this is the one from the Donnellan one, is it?
Mm-hmm.
There's basically a racist white woman talking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a couple of things of this. You need to kind of see it properly, but she's holding a child,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, she sounds like every one of my relatives. I mean, not what she's saying, but her accent. It sounds like this, and it's pretty shocking what she's had to say.
They're not clean, and the smell of the cooking makes you feel sick. You get the smell of the cooking upstairs in the bedrooms, and then they spit it out and use the entry as the toilet.
Now look, plainly that's ignorance. Now, there's a couple of questions you posed. One is exactly what I thought, Sue, when I saw it. I'd just love to find that baby.
Yes.
What happened to that child? As you said, it might have gone to school with
me.
You.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe.
Of course.
On the other hand, I'm not being sympathetic with that woman, but just as the immigrants weren't prepared for what awaited them, then absolutely no planning whatsoever seemed to have gone in preparing the population of Birmingham for what was coming in either.
And this is what I was saying. So before people came, what was said, it sounds as though there was no preparation, no one really understood. I don't know how many people knew that these adverts were sent out to the colonies, and waiting for people to come here to help in the rebuilding of the country. So when people came, it was a shock.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember as well that a lot of people suffer from subconscious racism by what they get from the media, by what they get from politicians. That shape their perceptions of what
but
people are.
It's in all our souls to a certain extent. There's a bit of it in all of us. It's something that is often said. I mean, you may care to contest that. I don't know, but it's kind
but you'd have to look at what racism is, and racism is about power and control. And for many of us, we do not have those powers or the control.
But with the stuff I've done in that region now, I've spoken to many sort of South Asians, many Afro-Caribbean voters have voted Leave. And every occasion, after the referendum, said, why'd you vote? So why did you vote Leave? Well, the immigrants, isn't it? The polls coming in after, everyone is guilty. Everyone's got to take a look at themselves. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. I totally agree. People become complacent sometimes, and they're sitting in a position that they want to hold on to. So then they look outwards instead of inwards at self. Like you said, you have to start with yourself.
Yeah, I think as well, I think people are kind of conditioned subliminally because, what somebody in the media says, or what politician says, carries a long way and it influences people, influences people's perception of who other people are, sometimes we don't seem to realize that this is happening because, as I said, this is done subliminally and we reinforce it by our behavior and our lack of proper response to people that we interact with. And so what racism spreads subconsciously, but
eventually we will have to take
a lot of people aren't aware of it.
Milton, you said did you say you were in the forces?
I was in the forces.
Because I'll be interested to hear what you say about Lester, who another guy who was in the forces. I mean, an extraordinary story. His experience as a black man in the army.
I got my finger cut. An officer who you think would know better saw my finger got cut with red blood, and he went to the office to tell people Lester got red blood. Do you imagine that? And this is somebody who educated at Sandhurst.
What went through your mind?
I won't tell you.
Stop, fuck.
I won't tell you.
mean, I don't know whether to be insulted, whether one should be insulted by that. It's just the complete banality of it is just astonishing. So,
but this is what I was born here, and it was something that I heard all the time. And trying to live in an environment where people thought that way. At school they used to say, as you can see, I'm not in terms of shade and color, I'm not very, very dark, but they would say things about if we sprayed and they didn't do the palm of our hands because our hands seemed to be a bit lighter. People used to want to touch our hair. They used to call us all these names, and that was at school, yet our parents were going through what they were going through, and then we were trying to live here and to contribute, and there is nothing there in terms of support, how to deal with this.
There's something fascinating you did in the film, which I wish I thought of doing this or asking the question, but they were sold. The immigrants were sold this story of a land of milk and honey, and then came and found it very different. Now, one would have thought they'd be then writing home and say, look, hang on, think twice about coming here. The buildings are frowning, it's raining all the time, and some of the locals aren't very nice to us. Yet they didn't. And this is the immigrant thing. I know the Irish did it when they went to America, the same thing. However hard it was, you had to justify your decision to those back home and say things were going rather well. So there's a guy you came across, some amazing old photos, a guy, Kieran Connell, is it, from Queen's in Belfast, who was just looking at the pictures. Great idea, this, looking at the pictures people were sending home. And in these pictures, they were very smart and well-dressed, but it wasn't quite as it wasn't quite as it seems.
I've heard stories of people actually paying for suits on hire purchase. Specifically for the purpose of having these photographs taken. Whatever was going on in these people's lives away from this studio, these images project this kind of image of aspiration, respectability, and these people, to me, they've made it.
It's fascinating, isn't it? So they become complicit in the myth themselves, even knowing the myth was just a myth.
But you don't want people to know that you are struggling, you have failed.
Yeah, I think another problem as well was the economic. It was economically beneficial for people to be here because where they came from, in Jamaica or wherever they came from, there was less money available, less work opportunities available. So coming here, there was money available. So that kind of gave the pressure. I took the pressure away a little bit,
now
so
we have a pretty
that wouldn't prevent people from coming, knowing that it was bad, as long as money
the
was here
port.
to be had. So that was a kind of
short job.
The money was the main driving force behind people not telling people the truth about the conditions they were living in. The finance took priority as far as earlier Caribbean people were concerned.
But I suppose we've got to be careful.
Now we're out of the UK, so we're driving on this
side
now.
Not to fall in the trap of just despairing over the whole thing, because there's also a lot to celebrate. I walk around Birmingham a lot, and I'm a white middle-class boy from Hagley, right, which is frankly where it was part of white flights. The people who did well, the white people in from Handsworth in the 50s and 60s and Smethwick and so on, people like my dad and my grandparents, you went off to Hagley, which was subconsciously was a white enclave, a bit different now, but at the same time, you look around Birmingham, there's a lot to celebrate there. It's a success story multiculturally, isn't it, to some extent? It's not all bad.
Well, yes, I think Caribbean people have made a lot of contribution, from the 50s, not only in factories and the work that nurses did, but in terms of our culture, our art, our language, we have contributed a lot in terms of languages. For example, the dictionary, Oxford Dictionary, has got a lot of contribution made by Jamaicans. You can see that in the streets as well.
Nobody's doubting that. But I'm sort of almost saluting the people
from Birmingham.
From Birmingham. I mean, the white people, if you like. There are a lot of closed minds, but for everyone who didn't want to touch a bus driver's hand or didn't want to see a black woman handling pastry, there were open minds and open hands and just learning to rub along.
And you can see the changes today. You can see the changes, and okay, so it's not a total change, But the thing is, it is changing. It has changed, and it's making a difference. And people have come, you know, they've made, their lives here. Their children have been brought up here. They have a career, if that's what they want, and they will say that Birmingham's their place.
Who's your hero, then, out of all this? Just let me ask both of you. Have you, in your personal life or your
My dad, without question, my dad.
Well, I think
for coming in the first place, or for surviving, or...
For everything. Because under the circumstances, coming to a new environment, new place, he didn't have relatives here, and he had to bring up his children also by himself, and he did the best that he could. So he is my greatest hero, without question.
And what about you, Mel?
I think it's my mother, very resilient, very wise lady, looked after me. I was an only child and I had everything I wanted.
Well, those two should have got together. Sue's dad and your mum, Mel?
Yeah, she looked after me. She's definitely my hero, and I worship her. Even though she passed away in 1996, I still worship her because she ensured that she educated me.
It's a joy talking to both of you. Thanks very much. Great work. That's Sue Brown and Milton Godfrey. Sue's film is BBC4's The First Black Brummies. Do look at it on iPlayer. Have a great weekend. Ellie, it's all yours.
Thanks, Adrian. Coming up, we are going to be talking big sporting performances, boxing, politics and more, including breakdancing.
And more live Premier League football than anyone else. This is
5 Live.
BBC 5 Live.
Yes, joining me on the Friday Sports panel today, 3 world champions from rugby, boxing and snooker. I'm Eleanor Oldroyd.
The top story on 5 Live, another MP resigns from the Labour Party.
And in sport, Chelsea and the FA to appeal against the Blues' 2-window transfer ban.
And the new Rugby Union Weekly podcast with everything you need to know about Wales against England is available to download right now on BBC Sounds.
This is BBC 5 Live.
First, the BBC News on 5 Live with Faye Rusco.
Ian Austin has announced he's leaving the Labour Party. The Dudley North MP says he has no plans to join the new independent group. Maya Goodfellow is a journalist and Jeremy Corbyn supporter.
It is important that we talk about the issues why people like Luciana Berger have left, and we shouldn't downplay that. I think there's also something to be said for the fact that Jeremy Corbyn's economic agenda, it did attract a lot of attention and excitement, and it did encourage people to vote for Labour in a way that they hadn't done for years. To say that this affects Labour worse than the Conservatives is also not a good look for the Conservatives to be losing MPs.
A range of emergency laws have been published by the Irish government, which will come into force if the UK leaves the EU without a deal. The Fine Gael senator and chairman of the Irish Brexit Committee is Neil Richmond.
This would allow an element of continuity in certain key areas such as transport, social welfare payments, higher education, and allow us to invest and supplement key industries like the agri-food sector. But be under no illusion, things will not be as good or as normal as we have now if we are forced to enact this legislation and a crash out occurs.
The mother of a 15-year-old boy who died at Hillsborough has told Preston Crown Court the football pitch looked like a battleground at the disaster. Dolores Steele was at the match, but in another part of the ground. She's been giving evidence at the trial of the match commander, David Duckenfield. He denies gross negligence manslaughter. Police say a group of teenagers have been left shocked and traumatised after a man was stabbed to death in a youth club in South London. The attack happened in Brixton last night. The victim was 23. A murder inquiry has begun. The Sports Minister wants to ban the sale of scratch cards and National Lottery tickets for under 18s. The current age limit is 16. Mims Davis says she wants to protect the most vulnerable. Mark Etches is the CEO of the charity Gamble Aware.
The National Lottery is rather unique when it comes to gambling products. Gambling in Britain is an adult activity, and clearly at 16 and 17 you are a child, and so we don't think that it's
here's the thing.
Japan's space agency appears to have successfully landed a spacecraft on an asteroid more than 300 million kilometres away from Earth. The Hayabusa 2 spacecraft will now try to collect rock samples. Dr. Megan Argo is an astronomy lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire.
It's a really interesting mission, and it's actually the second time that they've tried this. So this is Hayabusa 2. Hayabusa 1 was launched quite a few years ago, and it was doing a very, very similar thing, going to an asteroid to take some samples and bring them back. And that mission was a partial success, so this is the second attempt, and this one so far has been a fantastic success.
Right?
It's obviously still a long way to go.
13, whatever,
and the Royal Mail's announced
right?
the
But
price
like,
of a first
and then you have like 20,
to rise by
still
3
whatever, but then you
pence
have
to
21.
70
That's
pence
it.
next month.
There's
The
no
cost of a
teams
second
anymore.
class stamp
There's
will
no
increase
teams.
by the same
Right,
amount
so
to
do
61
that.
pence.
Benjamin will
Rob
21 and be
Schofield
done
has the
with that.
sports.
Chelsea and the FA will appeal against the transfer ban imposed on the club by FIFA set until the summer of 2020. The club denies that they breached rules around signing youth players from overseas. Maurizio Sarri's men have also today drawn Dynamo Kiev in the last 16 of the Europa League. Arsenal will play French club Rennes. Kilmarnock manager Steve Clarke says he's encouraged by the support he's received after speaking out against the sectarian abuse he suffered in their Scottish Cup defeat to Rangers at Ibrox on Wednesday. Fullback Lee Halfpenny will make his return from concussion a day after England face Wales in Cardiff in the Six Nations. He'll play for Scarlets against Cheetahs in the Pro 14 on Sunday, but a recall for the rest of the tournament is now an option. England centre Emily Scarratt, meanwhile, will miss the Women's Six Nations clash in Cardiff through injury. Second row Abby Scott captains the side. And Widnes Vikings have been deducted 12 points after going into administration. The 7-time Challenge Cup winners face liquidation if suitable investment isn't found by next week.
The Six Nations continues on 5 Live and 5 Live Sports Extra this weekend. On Saturday, on 5 Live Sports Extra, France hosts Scotland from 2:15, and from 4:45, it's Wales v England on 5 Live. And on Sunday, on 5 Live Sports Extra, it's Italy against Ireland from 2:50. The Six Nations on 5 Live and across the BBC. This is BBC 5 Live.
The Friday Sports Panel
with Eleanor Oldroyd.
Yes, it's that hour of the week which brings together stars of 3 very different sports to share their stories and give us their opinions and insights into some of the big issues of the moment. This week, should breakdancing be in the Olympics ahead of squash, karate, or even snooker? How much of an advantage does a passionate crowd give you? And are boxing fans being shortchanged by boxing broadcast politics? This week, I'm joined by a trio of world champions.
The final whistle is going to go. England have won the 2014 Women's Rugby World Cup. There is total hysteria from the players.
So you've heard of the Magnificent Seven, and you've heard the story of the Lone Ranger. Well, I think that makes us the 3 amigos.
And still, IBF featherweight champion of the world, Josh the Leeds Warrior.
It sounded good at the time.
Yes, so joining me today are England's record rugby union cap holder, Rocky Clark, IBF featherweight boxing world champion, Josh Warrington. And joining us very shortly, once his taxi has negotiated the streets of Dunstable, is the snooker world champion from 2005, Shaun Murphy. So Rocky and Josh, it's just the 2 of you to start with. Welcome to the programme.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Lovely to have you with us. So Shaun will kind of burst through the door any minute with you, Rocky. So
Be sure will.
So yeah, I hope so. I'll keep my fingers crossed. So make room for him when he comes in, and we'll get you both chatting to each other and to each other, all 3 of you, as we always do on the sports panel. And we want to hear from you, the audience, too, because in particular, as the teenager who's tipped to be basketball's next superstar, Zion Williamson, was injured after only 33 seconds of a match this week, when his shoe literally fell apart, causing him to injure his knee. We're asking you when your sporting equipment has let you down. Rocky, do you have one for us on that?
Yeah, quite an embarrassing one, actually. So back in the day when I was a bigger girl, hadn't been capped yet, and we were playing in a trial match in Coventry, I believe. And it was a match to go, a trial match for England to go out and tour Canada. And at one stage my bra broke, and so I was running round, and as I said, I was a bigger girl and quite heavy up top, and it was just they're flying around, so I had to try and control them. In the half time I ran off and went and changed my top.
Well, yes,
that's
and everything
brilliant.
As well. That's a serious. We kind of laugh, but actually that's a big serious issue. Josh, anything happened to you along those lines?
Not as such.
Not quite literally.
No.
Those lines.
My bra's never let me down. I'll have to say, as an amateur, as an amateur boxer, you wear head guards in the fights, and I remember as a kid, I'd blagged an head guard, and it were far too big for me, and halfway through one of the rounds it spun round. I took a punch and it spun round. It kind of left me blind for about 5 seconds, and I was still getting punched before the referee stopped it and adjusted it, but that happened on more than one occasion. So yeah, I would say the head guard.
So literally it just obscured your
yeah, so I was there moving about, and then because it was a lot bigger, it should have like fit snug, but because it didn't, and it was the wrong size, and you know your head's sweating and it's more prone to moving about, and you know punch come round and it just spun it round the side, so I was literally face covered, and my opponent just seeing that threw a few more punches before the referee could even dive in and stop it and adjust it, but So you then eventually got a head guard to properly fit you. Yeah, I had to dig into my piggy bank after that and invest in a decent one.
Well, look, I'm delighted to say that Sean is with us as well. Hi, Sean.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks. I won't get you to talk us through taxis in the M1, but I can.
Grief! Listen,
there
are two things, right? Anyone who knows me, there are two things that everyone knows about me. One, I'm addicted to Krispy Kreme donuts.
Fair.
And two, I hate being late for anything.
Oh, dear.
Like, I'd rather not go.
Come on.
I'm that person who goes to the cinema, half an hour early to watch the preview.
Well, I'm opposite side of corn there, Sean. I'm fashionably late, but I got here early today, so I'm quite proud of myself.
You did. Yeah, I'm feeling you, Josh. I'm always
rather not go at all. Like, really?
Well, we don't blame you in any way whatsoever.
That's even worse than being late. Like, no-show.
You can't watch the rest of the film.
I understand it's being late, but
who doesn't enjoy the nachos and the drinks? And if you haven't eaten all your gear by the time the film starts, are you even there for the right reason? That's the real question.
Well, look, we're delighted you're here. You missed the opening titles of the sports panel today, but that's fine. We've only said nice things about you so far. Look, let's get on with the sports panel with Sean Murphy, Josh Warrington and Rocky Clark. The panel is all here, and there's no doubt about the big sporting occasion of this weekend. All eyes and ears will be on Cardiff late on Saturday afternoon as the two unbeaten teams in this year's Six Nations, Wales and England, will lock horns in a raucous Principality Stadium. There's absolutely no doubt the Welsh public are making it as hostile a welcome as possible. Here's England scrum half Danny Kerr telling Five Live's Rugby Union Weekly podcast about the warmth of the welcome he and his teammates once received.
Generally, one time, everyone's giving us a load of stick.
I'm not even going to try it.
Giving us the finger. And this one lad in the middle of Cardiff thought, I'm going to take this one step further. We were all watching, ran at the bus, jumped and headbutted the side of the bus. It just showed you are hated there. Some of those fans generally hate you. They want to make it miserable for you. They want to make the journey in there scary in a way, but like intimidating, hostile. And then obviously the stadium's amazing to play out. You get stick the whole time when you're running out, but it kind of just fuels you a little bit more.
Well, of course, England's women are playing against Wales as well at Cardiff Arms Park, but Rocky, I'm guessing that the intensity of the atmosphere will not be quite the same as in the big stadium next door. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing to have that level of intensity from the crowd?
Yeah, you do thrive off it, but it can be so intimidating. One of the biggest things is, certainly as a forward, when you're trying to do your line-out calls and you're reacting to what they're doing in defence, you cannot hear. So you have to be able to use some signals to be able to know what line-out has been thrown, or you kind of have to read people's body language because you just can't hear when it's that noisy. But it certainly will be an intimidating place to go, a hostile environment, but also much sweeter to win the game as well.
I mean, Josh, you fought the start of this year two brilliant. You won your world title, and then when you defended it as well. But the first fight against Lee Selby was at Elland Road in Leeds.
Yes.
How many people were in there?
I think they were just short of 25,000, somewhere around that figure. Yeah.
And 90% cheering for you?
Yeah. Obviously home crowd, and me being a Leeds fan, Leeds lad. Majority of crowd for me.
What does that feel like?
It's a funny old one because I'd say for the last 4 or 5 years I've been fighting at home, fighting at Leeds, and people see it as an advantage, and I always see positives in either side, whether the fans are with you or against you. I certainly think that it adds a bit more pressure because there's an expectation.
It adds a bit more pressure,
people expect you just to win, no matter who you've got in front of you. Sometimes I think they forget that you've got another man in front of you with, a pair of gloves on, wanting to punch your head in. But you've obviously got to remain focused. over the years, I've seen people, whether it been like Lee Selby at Ellen Road or at the Leeds Arena, different opponents crumble as soon as they announce the ring walk, and
as early as that.
When you watch it back, and you see, I mean, by the time I get in at ring, you look over to the ring and you can see the looking about, and it's a distraction. And I always look at any percentage where their mind's off the game. Then
you need to get in there.
It's an extra added incentive to me, or it's an extra percentage to me.
I was gonna double check.
And what you got to forget as well in the boxing, the build-up can be all week. So you've got the press conferences, which are normally at home, or where the fight's going to take place. You've got the press conferences, you've got the weigh-in. So it can start as early as that. So after for instance, I've had fighters come from Australia, Japan. When they get there, they'll arrive on the Monday. They've got the press conference, then they've got the weigh-in, and when they're coming away from that and they get booed at the weigh-in, they'll have the moments where they're sat thinking about what they've got to expect on the ring walk and how the fight's going to go. I can see how it can be a positive in a fight, because when you're there and you're building up momentum, and in the second half of the fight you're getting tired, but you hear crowd chanting your name and you're roaring, it just gives you that second wind. But in the same breath, it can be dangerous, and it depends how you go with it. For instance, in my last fight I boxed Carl Frampton, and in Manchester Arena we had half of it at Leeds, half of it were the Belfast fans, and there were times when Carl was building a bit of momentum up in the second half of the fight, and I could see by his reaction, because he had landed a few punches and had a bit of success. It made him push his chest out and come forward even more, but that kind of played into my hands.
Yeah. So he was coming forward more than he should have done. I mean, Sean, because for you, you imagine that a snooker hall is just this calm, this quiet as you go to pot the balls. But is it as intense in a different way?
I mean, there's so many similarities from what we just heard, but then, some stark differences. Obviously, snooker doesn't have that tribal element of, like a team game. You're wearing my colours, and, I'm for you or against you. But there are certain players who you could play, and certainly in certain venues where the atmosphere is completely different. They talk about if you played Jimmy White at the old Wembley Conference Centre in the Masters, it was hostile. If you played Alex Higgins anywhere, it was hostile. And now when you play Ronnie O'Sullivan, his supporters bring that sort of extra element of, it's not that they just want Ronnie to win, they want you to lose, and I've played matches against Ronnie before, as our most prestigious event.
Well, if he wins, don't you automatically
verbal
lose?
Abuse from people in the crowd, as close as the front two rows. And this is a gentleman's sport, and we're not fighting, we're just playing snooker,
So what kind of things are they saying to you? So is this when you're going back to the chair, or when you're walking around the table?
Yeah, reactions to shots, as the applause dies down. I do still play the odd shot where I get a bit of a round of applause every now and again. But, you might get a round of applause, and then as it's dying down, there'll be people sat there in the front row, and they'll say things, under their breath, but so that you can hear them. And, I mean, I couldn't repeat them, they're vicious. And
repeat them.
Fortunately, when you play the majority of the guys on tour, that doesn't exist. It's you shake hands and may the best man win. But there are elements that would see it another way, and it's not always easy to do. But going back to the other point there, I mean, I've had it before where you actually feel the will of the crowd riding that wave of momentum, and it can affect the choices you're making in play. I'm guilty of that. I've played shots before that they were the wrong shot, they were the wrong choice, but I sensed it was what the crowd wanted to see, and it was also I was making my decision based on how I felt, and it wasn't based on actually what the right thing to do was.
Rocky, it's interesting that Eddie Jones has said the roof needs to be open at the Principality Stadium tomorrow, because Wales always want to have the roof closed, don't they? How much of a difference does that make?
Just being sort of enclosed with the roof shut, and I've been to a few games at the Principality, and the atmosphere is phenomenal, especially with level of noise with the roof shut. So, understandably, why Eddie wants the roof open, to take that little bit of extra noise out of it, but it's still going to be a a huge event, raucous. It's going to be crazy, exciting game.
Yeah, I have to say, I think probably the loudest stadium I've ever been in was in Cardiff when it was Wales Ireland in the Grand Slam decider a few years ago. But you know, whatever happens on the field, there's inevitably been quite a lot of mind games off the field. Eddie Jones at the forefront this week. First off, saying they were playing the greatest Welsh side ever, and then there was this little exchange with our rugby union correspondent Chris Jones yesterday.
It's a great opportunity for us to play against the Welsh side that's expected to win. They've won 11 games in a row, so they can create a Welsh record. Their most famous coach is coaching his last game against England, so it's a great chance for us to go down there and spoil the party.
You say they're expected to win. You're 4-point favourites with the bookies and 1-2 on. You've beaten Ireland easily, you've beaten France easily, so there's an air of expectation.
Everybody
on you
beats
guys
France.
As well.
Well, if you just read the papers this week, it's all been about Wales. So we're happy for them to carry that expectation.
I'm not that type of
see how
I'm not
they
a bad
handle the burden of it.
I just,
I'm sure that Warren Gatland has not said a great deal
this
week, Sean, because Eddie Jones is obviously trying to put the pressure on the opponents today with what he's saying there.
It's so interesting. Here's the kicker, right? Here's the one.
Yeah, you didn't get the kicker,
As sports play, we're all fans deep down. The
it.
majority of us, we love our sports. And the only reason he said what he said in the press this week is in the hope that one of those players he's playing against has heard it and has read it. On social media, he sees the clip, he clicks the link and he reads the full interview. He's driving in the car on the team or wherever and he hears the interview. It's only been said for that tactical reason, so that at the moment the most pressure comes on, that player remembers that, oh, he said we're meant to win. He said I'm meant to do this. That's the only reason he said it. It's fascinating.
Well, and also because boxing, of course, has plenty of mind games, we know, Josh. But actually, I noticed that before the Carl Frampton fight, people were saying that you were very respectful of each other, which is quite unusual.
Not really from my part, because I've always respected my opponents. I know that boxing's an hard sport, and it changes people's life in that 36 minutes, in that 12 rounds. Some people, unfortunately don't come out ring. Some people come out with life-changing injuries. So for me, I realise that you've got to respect the opponent who's stood in your corner. Yeah, you want to beat him. You want to really do some damage because you want to win the fight, you want to progress forward, you want to go carry on your career.
Look at that, it's a double, not a double-decker, but it's a double.
It's normally enough for me.
Tensions
can get high, can get a little bit feisty. The fight before,
but with that, I'm going to leave it.
We had got a bit personal, so there were a lot of needles said. But I have seen other fighters who use a bit of psychology to get under people's skin, and I've seen it against me. I've seen a fighter may say something in a press conference, and then his fans will be backing him up on social media.
So
that's a massive tool these days.
I will do more of these. Hopefully, I won't get copyrighted and everything. And I guess see you next time. Goodbye. Once the fucker catches up. I'm just gonna assume it's over, so yeah, there you go.